So I actually wrote this script like weeks ago. I also wrote it between like sets at the gym because that's pretty much the only remaining bits of free time I have in my fucking life on a day-to-day basis. I work on a lot of projects when I'm not at work, and I just got really busy from like August to now. So it was rough. I just haven't had the energy to really sit down and like properly work on anything, even though I'm sitting on 4 separate complete edited videos, and I have just completely failed to do anything with them. One of which has been in process for like a year now. I'm working on like an entire series retrospective for The Flash because me and my little brother rewatched it somewhat recently, and yet despite the fact that I just finished reviewing season 8, I just have not bothered. I just knocked something off my desk. So in the spirit of coming back, doing better, getting back to what I was doing before, let's talk about the Game of the Year contender, Spider-Man 2. Now, if your only reference to Spider-Man 2 is Insomniac being unable to stop stroking off their beef to their own game, then you'd probably think this is like a masterclass in gameplay, game design, narrative. And it is. A masterclass in gameplay, that is. The other two are seriously up for debate, and your mileage will vary depending on how woke or broke you are.
Congratulations, you get to live out the rest of your life behind bars.
But seriously, I don't really subscribe to that whole moronic behavior thing on either side of the political aisle, so if you're looking for another Spider-Man 2 is so woke that Mary Jane broke into my house and stepped on my bull, then you're shit out of luck because I do not fucking care. But if your main exposure to this game is through social media, then you probably think this game is like universally loved and praised by critics and consumers alike.
Nothing more beautiful. Can I tell you something, Spider-Man? I know I'm fading. It's scary as hell. Thought I'd be ready, but nothing gets you ready. Nothing. When I'm here, it's like she is.
Wake the fuck up, samurai. We have a city to burn.
And while yes, OpenCritic and Metacritic would agree as Spider-Man 2 is currently one of 2023's highest rated games, there's a separate conversation to be had concerning rose-tinted glasses, nostalgia bait, and good old-fashioned I want to be liked by everyone, so I'll ignore glaring issues on an effort to fit in with the crowd. How do you do, fellow kids? My name is Penis Porker, and I'd love to get sloppy with BDSM and getting that. I fucking hate this joke. But ignoring the potential of people being like, it's just as good as the first game, so like whatever, here's a free 9 out of 10. There are several people who take issue with side missions, voice acting, length, longevity, endgame, performance. I am one of those people. By the way, I'm going to spoil like this entire game, so just be aware of that. Spider-Man 2 is what I would describe as a blockbuster video game in every meaning of the term. It has fun moments, you'll banter about it with your friends, it might even crop up in a conversation, but you probably won't bother replaying it, save for maybe like every couple of years or so. It's safe, it's predictable, it's entertaining, hell, it might even make you feel something for a few minutes of its average 20-hour runtime, including everything side questy. The problem is, you'll forget all about it by the next time that a game rolls around. You know what you won't forget? Alan Wake 2. Hashtag Alan Wake 2 should have been Game of the Year 2023. Let's start with the story, or as the woke agenda would have you believe, the propaganda piece disguised as a Spider-Man story. Okay, that's the last time I'll make a woke agenda joke, I promise. Probably. The first game kind of reminds me a lot of Winter Soldier in a lot of ways, where like the game just kind of correctly assumes you know who the Crimson Web Slinger is, and that he's been doing this for quite some time. There's no filler, there's no time wasted on establishing who our protagonist is, because we're not mindless monkeys, and we understand that Spider-Man is Peter. Peter wants to bone the tomboy redhead, and Otto Octavio is the future supervillain who hinges pretty much the entire future of Spider-Man as a character. He also bangs Aunt May. The follow-up minigame, cleverly disguised as a full-fledged experience priced accordingly, is affectionately titled Miles Morales, and while the average schmo will try and convince you that Insomniac always planned for my boy Kilometer and Morales to be one of the focal points of their game, I'm positive it had nothing whatsoever to do with the rampant popularity of the Sony Spider-Verse movies.
What was that? I'm gonna fuck fuck your ass.
No! Now, in terms of gameplay, the Miles game did feel like a natural evolution of the world and showcased some exciting possibilities for the future of Insomniac's new baby. But whereas they both fit together like a pair of well-oiled gloves, Spider-Man 2 is a glove that feels like it's 2 sizes too large, being fitted into a hand that has like 2% of its muscles operating effectively. Spider-Man 2's story is about as cheesy comic booky as you can get. The opening is fucking epic, with you and Miles tag teaming a man of the sand. There's epic cutscenes, there's insane wild takedowns, has your blood pumping through your veins like you just won round 1 of a heavyweight championship title, like just gnashing at the bit like, yes, yes, come on, let's go, more. And fuck me if the game doesn't just slap you in the nuts and come to a screeching, boring ass halt for like the next 10 goddamn hours of its story. Now, believe it or not, even though I'm running some of the footage in the background to make you think that I'm trying to single out one character in particular, I actually really like Harry as a character in this game, and to a degree, I actually really like MJ. Sure as hell like her more than the first game. Miles and supporting characters like Genki and whatnot, but emphasis on to a degree. Harry is a fun enough character to interact with, but his progression into like eventual supervillain of the big black cocky variety feels really mishandled. Now, I do agree that usually arcs like his come off as too rushed, but in this instance it actually comes off as too slow. Harry's increasingly limited interaction with the core group, the constant coddling by his father, and the ever-growing distance between himself and Peter when the symbiote tries to corrupt our gallant Spider-Man, it leads to this bubbling tension that you're just waiting to burst.
Whoa. Hey, man. The suspense is terrible. He's gonna go this time. I hope it'll last.
Only it feels like it's supposed to burst like 3 or 4 times before it actually does. And whereas most people would call that tension, I call it inability to commit. Quite frankly, the most interesting anti-hero of the game isn't even Harry, it's fucking Sandman. Except his story goes nowhere. I mean, shit, despite his limited appearances, I was more emotionally invested in Norman Osborn and his ongoing struggle to rationalize the morality of a world that allows superhumans like Spider-Man to exist while also taking away his wife and son in cruel, unstoppable circumstances. That is interesting. Harry bitching about not having his big fat black balls all the time only got really irritating. Yes, I know he's dying without it. I also don't even know what his illness is. All I know is Homeboy has a cane and hobbles around like Ebenezer Scrooge for some reason, but he has 19 inches of venom, he's all hunky-dory. I know his mom died of the same thing, but what is it? There's no stakes because there's practically no context. And if you're going to take something that fucking important and tell me that, oh, well, you can learn about it if you, like, do some reading into the game's lore, fuck you, okay? Something that important should not be relegated to a lore entry that I have to go read to understand. And that's coming from somebody who is a Destiny 2 stan. I know what I'm talking about. Lore should not be relegated to explain something significant. But while I can forgive my issues with Harry due to him still being intriguing enough to the cast, fuck me sideways and call me Noah, because the arc of Miles is so uninteresting and half-baked, I would send it back to the chef with a note that simply stated, "This is fucking lame, who let bro cook?" Look, I know you want Miles to be your baby. Insomniac has said that he is the main Spider-Man going forward, which has nothing to do with Across the Spider-Verse, guys, okay? Like, okay? This was their choice, okay? But oh my gosh, man. Have you ever studied nuance and characterization or even just like seen a YouTube video on it? Miles is so one-dimensional and altruistically virtuous at every possible contentious circumstance that it is nauseating. You know what makes the Spider-Verse Miles really interesting? I can't speak to the comic book one because I don't really read comics. He's extremely conflicted between being Spider-Man, being his own Spider-Man, and just being a kid from Brooklyn. The first 2 games made me feel like that's kind of where we were going, and with Mr. Negative in this game, and Miles almost sacrificing a boat dock worth of innocent lives to try and have his way with that tight Asian ass, it's all glossed over by the next cutscene with nothing more than like, oh, don't worry Miles, we'll find Lee, and me staring at the screen like fucking Homelander, where I'm like, is that really just how we're going to gloss over this entire story arc? But Scoop Hash, I hear you bellow from the basement where you're hogging the PS5 Spider-Man edition like it's your only chance of losing your virginity. Isn't that the definition of nuance? No, not really, because everything outside of that limited instance is just Miles being so fucking good boy that it makes apathetic secondhand mass murder look like a beach vacation. And the issue is that Miles's goodness isn't like, it's as wide as a puddle, and it is just as deep. He's a fantastic friend. His mom is completely altruistic and fixing the community of Harlem in strides. His best friend is a metrosexual who wants nothing more than remind you that he's so incredibly smart he can program anything because he's so smart. He's in love with a deaf LGBT ally who's so talented at spray paint art that she's constantly making her neighborhood a better place and making everyone around her better. And on top of all that, he still finds time to rid the neighborhood of guns, solve crimes from racist white guys, appropriating music from people of color, helping a homosexual student ask out his man crush. You get the fucking idea.
You fucking...
And for those of you that want to like sit down and say I'm taking a stance as like a right-leaning anti-woke perspective from a developer that just wants to showcase groups of people that in cultures, you know, that just typically don't get the spotlight in gaming, I'd like to take this moment to emphasize how little difference it makes to me in terms of what side of the political aisle you find yourself on, because all of you are fucking idiots as far as I'm concerned. I have no issue with these things being in my game. I have no issue with them being part of the story. There's just a difference between showing and telling. Do not preach to me, talk to me. I know it's not exactly a controversial take to have nowadays, but it genuinely makes no difference to me. Conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, Anarchist, Marxist, Socialist, fucking hell, all of you are wrong and none of you have 100% good ideas. Just shut the fuck up and enjoy your life. I have zero issues with developers and artists using their platform to mention their agendas and their leanings. Comics, video games, and movies have always been socially relevant and politically charged. If you are one of those people who are going, but comics have never been political, fuck your own face. On the flip side of that conversation, Insomniac going so out of their way to make their point known, I was blasted in the face with so much social positivity. It made me feel like I was watching a PSA about the dangers of drunk driving sponsored by 2008 Kids Bop. What about when Miles almost kills Lee in Craven's warehouse? Well, he doesn't. He doesn't even come close. So what's your point? Miles' struggle starts and ends with his dad's death. Pretty much nothing past that point is an actual struggle. Maybe we'll see more of Insomniac's darker, more nuanced side come out when we get Spider-Man 3 or Wolverine. I honestly kinda doubt it though. Speaking of missed dark opportunities though, let's address the red-headed elephant in the room. Jessie from Mary Jane Watson, esteemed podcaster who quits her job at the Daily Bugle because it wasn't morally ethical. Yeah, that's right. Everyone is a fucking saint in this game. MJ has always been Peter's rock. That's a little Bible for the two Christians that ever watch my videos. And while I do agree I could have done with less of her, I did find her far more likable than I did in the first game, both in terms of character, writing, and her gameplay sections. A lot has been said negatively about her gameplay sections, like how she can sneak around hunters trained by the only villain in the Spider-Man mythos to like properly beat him, but fuck it, logic doesn't matter because girl boss. I don't know, man, I kid. I actually don't mind these gameplay sections, and the tunnel bit we have to escape from Peter as the symbiote was actually pretty damn well done and ratcheted up the tension by a much needed amount. But these are just characters. What about the grander scale of it all? The main course, the pièce de résistance, the Mona Lisa, the gabagool. It's okay. Good at its best, boring at its worst. I mentioned before, a lot of the 20-hour playtime of this entire package kind of feels like it comes to a screeching halt right before things really get moving in the final couple of hours. And I do maintain that to be the case. The opening section where you learn about the symbiote, you gain its powers, you see Kraven's capabilities, and you fight Sandman are so excellent that by comparison, the rest of the game just fails to deliver on that hype. But when you finally do get to see 19 inches of Venom up close, the game starts to feel amazing again. I just wish this momentum was way more consistent, because instead it comes off as like Insomniac wanting to pad the playtime because they realized most players would crush through the open world activities in like 10 additional hours. That's not hyperbole, by the way. I will mention that here soon. Funny enough, I actually considered naming this video Spider-Man 2 is the anti-Arkham City because it reminded me a lot of Rocksteady's sophomore title, not only because they share the same number in the overall trilogy of their games, but also because it was significantly lacking in areas that Arkham City ends up nailing.
That actually is pretty funny.
Arkham City evolved the combat, the world design, the gameplay structure, the interaction, the traversal, the side quests. It dialed that all up by 11 compared to its predecessor, which was already at like a 9 out of 10. Spider-Man 2 has done the same thing, but Arkham City developed its characters in meaningful, nuanced, and mature ways that made you look both backward and forward at its bookend of Asylum and Night with new reverence and consideration. It fulfilled meaningful character arcs, presented difficult questions, and left a lot of room for interpretation as to how to justify certain moral quandaries. Spider-Man 2 did the opposite of that. It dumbed down the characters so that every 12-year-old can learn how it feels to have the swagger of a black New York teenager and the quirked up white boy goated with the sauce busting it down cuck style. It reduced the amount of enjoyment the open world had while giving you far too much ease of access to finish activities.
I've had a lot of things blow up on me, but this would be my first bicycle.
The voice acting and side missions suffer under the tremendous feeling of been there, heard that. Like, let's use one example. One of the side missions in Arkham City and Arkham Knight is tracking down the Mad Hatter, who then kidnaps you and forces you to fight to the death in an effort to break your mind so he can kidnap female victims and force them into a life of manic servitude. Spider-Man 2 has you fighting in similar scenarios with Mysterio, who's cleverly disguised as Lasky from Halo 4. And then when you get to the end, there's no epic confrontation. It's just, nah, Mysterio's a good guy now. He's this dumb little puss. And there's no stakes, there's no payoff, there's no vindication. It's just done. And speaking of good voice acting, Arkham City had that in troves.
How does it feel, Wayne, to stand on the very stones that ran with your parents' blood? Do you feel sad?
Bruce.
Full of rage? Or does that outfit help bury your feelings, hiding your true self?
I mean, even in the side missions, man, whether you're talking like Victor Zsasz, the Penguin, Deadshot, Azrael, everything was good, if not fantastic. I don't know who out there was saying that the Howard or the missing grandpa mission in Spider-Man 2 made you shed tears when they're talking like literal real-life NPCs who are emoted through an AI program.
And she's gone.
I'm sorry.
You said my granddaughter was looking for me? Let's go see her.
Fuck, you're old.
But this is mid as hell dialogue and delivery, and you're high if you think otherwise. If you found this sad or depressing, like, I get it, man. We all respond to emotional moments with varying stimuli, but you're probably the same person to see like a I love you 3000 meme on Facebook and cry your eyes out while you're typing through the tears. Tony was the best ever. Oh my God, I miss him so much. It's sad. Just not the kind of sad that you think it is. I mean, this is as good a time as any to mention that remastered Peter just does not give off the same emotional vibes as the original Peter. Look, I know that Insomniac clarified why exactly this change was made, and I do think they are on the up and up concerning that change. I do think it was a decision not made lightly, and making him look more like Tom Holland and not more unique probably had absolutely nothing to do with the rampant success of Far From Home. They're completely unrelated, okay? But there was something just far more raw, unique, and special about the original look that Peter had. This version of Peter just doesn't land for me. And I know a lot of people both agree and disagree with the changes to his looks, but he looks so much like every single basic Instagram reel posting white boy that I found it a genuine struggle to get through some of his scenes without stifling a laugh. Even his emotion-heavy moments with Miles, Harry, and MJ just lack that same visual weight that original Peter had in spades. I mean, not helped by the facial animations, while fantastic, they just look, the character model looks too clean and glossed over. I don't know how else to explain it, but original character models had this grit and this grain to them that felt more cinematic as opposed to their current versions that just feel more like store-bought asset flips. And there are exceptions to that rule though. Miles does look better. Venom and Kraven look fantastic. And the combination of the PS5's SSD and ray tracing capabilities made those character animations and details look, so fucking good. Okay, so clearly the story and characters didn't quite do it for me like the previous game did, but what about the gameplay? Look, from a design and evolution perspective, this game is a masterclass and is significantly better than the first game. And I really do mean that from the bottom of my heart. Web slinging through the city with a massive variety of chainable moves to maintain a speed previously reserved for people like Superman, while oh my gosh. Web slinging through the city with a massive variety of chainable moves to maintain a speed previously reserved for Superman while dodging between obstacles, skydiving from hundreds of feet high up only to whip in at the last moment never fails to feel absolutely exhilarating every single time. Combat as well has been massively improved with more refined gear choices and abilities that have you feeling like a high-powered superhero without the crutch of being overpowered like we saw in the first game or in Miles Morales. There are still arguments to be made that certain passive abilities are overly strong and give you far too much uptime, like with combat abilities which turn most boss encounters on higher difficulties into just a war of attrition while you wait for abilities to become available again. But boss encounters aside, the individual fights you'll get into with sometimes upwards of like 20 enemies on screen at once really do feel impactful. Maybe not to the same degree as the excellent scene in Arkham Knight or like Infamous, but still excellent nonetheless. And really, at the end of the day, as long as the combat and traversal do hit, then what could be the downside? Length and bugs. I ran into a grand total of 1 bug when playing the first game. I got Peter stuck on an obstacle when walking around the Feast headquarters, and for some reason the game would just not register my thumbstick inputs and I had to restart the entire mission. But this game, I don't know, man. I'll run as much footage as I can find in the background, but I ran into about 3 bugs almost every other mission. And I mean, this would vary from getting stuck on the environment to not dodging when the input was correctly tapped, to character models glitching in and out of existence, to hair bugging out, enemies glitching into the floor, forcing me to wait for the game to respawn them or forcing me to restart the mission in general. Symbiote enemies randomly spawning into the sky during public events so I couldn't actually finish the public events. Gas trucks on fire would spawn into debris, so then I couldn't plug the holes and would automatically fail the crime event, which meant that I had to reload the world because technically I failed a mission. And, you know, just a ton of stuff like that. I wouldn't necessarily call any of those game breaking, but just compared to how polished the first game felt, this seems like a significant step back, despite the more powerful PS5 being a priority and being a current-gen only release. But I can forgive a few bugs when over the course of 30 hours they were pretty few and far between. But speaking of, 30 hours, holy shit, this game is barely 30 hours long. Bearing in mind that 10 of those hours are the core story completion, with probably easing that out to more like 20 hours if you're figuring in like some relevant side quests to the main story. But the next 10 hours after that, of like stopping Mysterio, finishing the symbiote nest, collecting spider bots, talking to that dumb old fuck Howard, they're so woefully short that I really did think I had missed something and that the new Game Plus was going to open up an entire new section for me to play. But there is no Game Plus, so no, this was it. And I figured if this was it, at least there was a justification for continuing open world crime events to finish out the skill trees, the suit, and the gadget unlocks, right? Nope. Unless you have the spatial awareness of a sunfish, you will have more than enough materials to unlock everything in your kit, your skill trees, and your drip game by the time those 30 hours are over. So, really the only thing left there is to swing around New York because the game really made me feel like Spider-Man and enjoy the gameplay. And yeah, there really is the only thing left. Except you only get to do it the same time of day. All the time. Which fucking sucks because the majority of crime events also only have like 10 enemies. And they only spawn when you leave certain areas and go to new ones. There's not nearly as much Easter eggs to find. So most of the post-game content is just swinging around listening to Sunflower. If you made it to the end of the video, you probably think I hate this game, right? Well, wake up, liberal, because I did really... Fuck, I hate these jokes. Because I did really enjoy my time with this game. Just significantly less than I did with the first game. While there are evolutionary advantages in traversal, combat, level design, and presentation, it's all marred by a downgrade in storytelling, characterization, side content, and length and execution. Characters are muddled and so righteous at every turn that it feels like a sermon as opposed to a narrative. Bugs, while not game-breaking, are far more plentiful compared with the first game, and the lack of meaningful side content really brings the package down by a substantial amount. This open world is fucking huge, and it just does not feel like there's enough to do in it. Bear in mind, guys, this game is $70 before taxes. And frankly, for that amount of money, I just expect more from Insomniac.
We are healthy, strong. This is what you wanted.
Fucking thing sucks!
But hey, if I've learned anything from these developers and their interviews, they do not give a fuck what I, you, or anyone else thinks. And while you could argue that's indicative of confidence, I would argue it's indicative of ego.